السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today we will talk about the eyelids. In this lecture we will fulfill the following items: position and function of the eyelids, layers of the eyelids, and from this layer we will talk about tarsal plate, conjunctiva, and circumorbital and palpebral muscles. Then we will talk about blood supply, nerve supply, and lymphatic drainage of the eyelids. Position, functions, and layers of the eyelids. The upper eyelid covers the upper 1/6 of the cornea, but the lower eyelid just covers the lower margin of the cornea. When we close the eye, the upper eyelid moves downward to cover this cornea. Both upper and lower eyelids meet at the lateral canthus, which in direct contact with the eyeball, and the medial canthus, which is separated from the eyeball by locus lacrimalis. There is central pink elevation in the locus lacrimalis called cruncle. It's easy to know the function of the eyelids. The eyelids protect the eye from trauma or excessive light. Also, the act of blinking maintains a thin film of tears over the cornea. Layers of the eyelid. The first layer is skin, then superficial fascia. And in the superficial fascia there is embedded hair follicle from which the eyelashes passes outward. Here there is two types of gland: sweet gland called sweet gland of Moll, and sebaceous gland around the hair follicle called sebaceous gland of Zeiss. After the superficial fascia, we will find the layers of orbicularis oculi muscle, then submuscular connective tissue. And this layer of submuscular connective tissue is continuous with the subaponeurotic space of the scalp. It means that any effusion of pus or blood will pass downward into the upper lid. Also, in the submuscular connective tissue layer, there is the main nerve supply of the eyelid. It means that local anesthesia will be injected deep to the orbicularis oculi muscle. Tarsal plate, muscles, and gland. And the last layer is the conjunctiva or palpebral conjunctiva. This is the layers of the eyelid. Skin is the first layer, then superficial fascia, orbicularis oculi muscle, submuscular connective tissue, tarsal plate and the gland, and the palpebral conjunctiva is the last layer. Now we'll talk about the tarsal plate. The tarsal plate is a dense fibrous connective tissue which supports the eyelid. Its function is supportive to the eyelids. As we see, the tarsal plate is crescentic in shape with forward convexity to adapt the anterior surface of the eye. The transverse diameter of both superior and inferior tarsus is 25 mm, but the central height is different. It's clear that the superior tarsus is broader than the inferior tarsus plate. The superior tarsus is 10 mm in diameter, but the inferior tarsus is 4 mm in diameter. This is about the central height of both tarsi. Attachment of tarsal plate. There is two borders for the tarsal plate. The ciliary border is the free border here, This is the ciliary border of superior tarsus and the ciliary of inferior tarsus. And the orbital border. The orbital border of the tarsal plate attached to the orbital septum and the tarsal muscles, either superiorly or inferiorly also. But the superior tarsus, there is a third attachment for the aponeurosis of the levator palpebrae superioris muscle, which is attached to the anterior surface of the superior tarsus. The tarsal glands is also called meibomian glands. This gland is modified sebaceous gland embedded in the posterior surface of the tarsi. It means that it can be visible if the both eyelids is everted or are everted. The tarsal gland open into the free palpebral margin. This gland open into the free palpebral margin, and the tarsal gland secrete oily secretion. This secretion is important to reduce the evaporation of tear film present in front of the eyeball. Also, it is important the presence of this oily secretion on the margin of the eyelids here prevent passage of the tears from the eye into the face. The conjunctiva. On the other hand, the conjunctiva is transparent mucous membrane. This transparent mucous membrane line the eyelids, and here it is called palpebral conjunctiva. And also it covers the eyeball and this part called palpar conjunctiva. The reflection of palpebral conjunctiva to the palpar conjunctiva, this reflection called conjunctival fornix, either superior fornix or inferior fornix of the conjunctiva. In the superior fornix of the conjunctiva, mainly in the lateral part of this fornix, there is opening of the lacrimal gland, as we will discuss in the following lecture. Goblet cells. Mucus secreting goblet cells. It is scattered cells in the epithelial lining of the conjunctiva, like this. This all goblet cell. It's mucus secreting cells present. It is abundant near the fornix, either superior fornix here or in inferior fornix, but is absent in the limbus, corneoscleral junction, and also in the exposed part of the sclera. Other that, it is distributed or scattered in the both palpebral and palpar conjunctiva. Now we'll talk about the palpebral and palpar conjunctiva. The palpebral conjunctiva, it means it is a conjunctiva which line the eyelids. It is very vascular, but the palpar conjunctiva, it is slightly vascular. The palpebral conjunctiva is continuous with the lining with the skin here, continuous with the skin, and with the opening of the tarsus gland, and with the lacrimal canaliculi. Then lacrimal sac, as we will discuss in the following lecture. The lacrimal apparatus we will discuss in the coming lecture. The palpebral conjunctival epithelium is continuous here with the lacrimal puncta, lacrimal canaliculi, lacrimal sac, and the nasolacrimal duct which reach the nose. This is important to know because it is a serious route of infection from the nose to the eye. But the palpebral conjunctiva which cover the sclera, is the epithelium of this conjunctiva is continuous with the epithelium of the cornea. Otherwise, this palpebral conjunctiva is loosely attached to the eyeball or sclera. What mean by semilunar fold? Semilunar fold is a thickened fold of the conjunctiva present in the medial canthus. Lateral to the cruncle. This is the semilunar folds. It is mimic the nictitating membrane which is present in the fish like sharks, like this picture. This is the nictitating membrane here. The homology of this membrane in the human is semilunar fold of the conjunctiva. Circumorbital and palpebral groups of muscle. In this part, we will discuss the following items or the following muscles: orbicularis oculi muscle, corrugator supercilii, levator palpebrae superioris, and the tarsal muscles. Muscle. This is a picture of orbicularis oculi muscle, and this muscle has three parts. Orbital part present around the bony orbit. This is the orbital part. Palpebral part in both superior and inferior eyelids. And the third part is the lacrimal part, which is around the lacrimal sac, present in the lacrimal fossa. Let's start by the orbital part of the orbicularis oculi muscle. And each muscle we will talk about its origin, insertion, nerve supply, and its action. About the orbital part of orbicularis oculi, it arises from the medial angle of the eye here, from the medial palpebral ligament and the underlying bones, which is the frontal process of maxilla and maxillary process of frontal bone. So the origin of orbital part from the medial palpebral ligament and the underlying bones. This is the frontal process of maxilla and maxillary process of frontal bone. Then these fibers radiate around the orbital margin like this and attached or get inserted into the skin or into the overlying skin. It's about the origin and insertion. It inserted into the overlying skin. The action of the orbicularis of the orbital part of this muscle is when act alone, it draws the eyebrow downward, producing wrinkles of the skin around the orbital margin. But when act with the palpebral part, it produces forced closure of the eyeball when we expose to foreign body or excessive light. Also, it compresses the orbital content in severe coughing and sneezing. This action prevents over distension of the veins of the eye. Now we'll talk about the palpebral part of orbicularis oculi, and this palpebral part present in the eyelids. The origin of the palpebral part the same as the orbital part. It arises from the medial palpebral ligament, frontal process of maxilla, maxillary process of frontal bone. The insertion of this palpebral part passes into the lids, either superior or inferior eyelids, inserted into tarsal plate and in the lateral palpebral ligament and overlying skin. So it's inserted into overlying skin or skins of the eyelids, tarsal plate, and lateral palpebral ligament. The action of this muscle alone produces gentle closure of the eye as during sleep. Nerve supply, the lacrimal part of the orbicularis oculi muscle present in the lacrimal fossa. This lacrimal part take origin from the lacrimal cresta and the nasolacrimal sac, and inserted into also the tarsal plates of the eyelids The action of this part of the orbicularis oculi important in regulation of the drainage of the tears by controlling the size of the lacrimal sac. So it helps drainage of the tear into the nasolacrimal duct and to the nasal cavity. Nerve supply of the three parts of the orbicularis oculi take nerve supply from the facial nerve. It takes from the two branches from the facial nerve, temporal and zygomatic branches of the facial nerve. The second muscle is corrugator supercilii muscle, and this is a small pyramidal muscle present on the medial end of the eyebrow. This is a superior orbital margin. It is elevated in the medial two-thirds, and this elevation called the superciliary arch. This is superciliary arch. The origin of this muscle from the medial end of this superciliary arch, then inserted like other muscles of the facial expression. All these muscles take bony origin and inserted into skin overlying the middle of the superciliary arch. The action or nerve supply, facial nerve, temporal branch of facial nerve, like the orbicularis oculi muscle. The action of this muscle, it is one of the muscles of the facial expression. The two muscles of both sides produce downward downward and medial depression of the eyebrows to produce a shelf-like elevation over the eye as in exposure to the bright light. Like this picture. The corrugator supercilii muscle of both sides drew this eyebrows downward and medially like this to produce shield the eye to protect the eyes from excessive light or excessive exposure to sunlight. Also, it produces vertical wrinkles of the skin. This is the act of frowning. Now we'll talk about the palpebral and palpar conjunctiva. The palpebral conjunctiva, it means it is a conjunctiva which line the eyelids. It is very vascular, but the palpar conjunctiva, it is slightly vascular. The palpebral conjunctiva is continuous with the lining with the skin here, continuous with the skin, and with the opening of the tarsus gland, and with the lacrimal canaliculi. Then lacrimal sac, as we will discuss in the following lecture. The lacrimal apparatus we will discuss in the coming lecture. The palpebral conjunctival epithelium is continuous here with the lacrimal puncta, lacrimal canaliculi, lacrimal sac, and the nasolacrimal duct which reach the nose. This is important to know because it is a serious route of infection from the nose to the eye. But the palpebral conjunctiva, which cover the sclera, is the epithelium of this conjunctiva is continuous with the epithelium of the cornea. Otherwise, this palpebral conjunctiva is loosely attached to the eyeball or sclera. What mean by semilunar fold? Semilunar fold is a thickened fold of the conjunctiva present in the medial canthus. The tarsal muscles. The tarsal muscle is superior tarsal muscle and inferior tarsus. It's also called molar muscles. This is the first molar, and the inferior one called the second molar muscle. The superior tarsus originates from the undersurface of the levator palpebrae superioris and inserted into the upper margin of the superior tarsal plate. It takes nerve supply from sympathetic innervation, and we will discuss its innervation in detail later on in the lecture of nerve supply to the orbit. The inferior tarsal muscle. The inferior tarsal muscle originates from the fibrous sheath of the inferior oblique and inferior rectus. This is the inferior tarsus muscle, and inserted into the lower border of the inferior tarsal plate. Also takes sympathetic nerve supply. The action of both tarsal, superior and inferior tarsal, is they help in elevation and depression of the eyelids respectively. Also, they widen the orbital fissure as in star or fear or excitement, because their nerve supply is sympathetic. Due to their autonomic supply, they help in the facial expression according to mood. It means that they adjust the size of the orbital opening according to the mood and other factors. Blood supply of the eyelids. When we talk about blood supply, I mean arterial supply and venous drainage. The arterial supply of the eyelid mainly from two arteries. The lateral palpebral artery and medial palpebral artery. This is the main blood supply of the superior and inferior eyelids. The lateral palpebral artery arises from the lacrimal artery, which originates from the ophthalmic artery, but the medial palpebral artery get directly from the ophthalmic artery. Both medial palpebral and lateral palpebral arteries divided into superior and inferior branches and make arterial arcades which supply the eyelids. The superior eyelid take another blood supply from supratrochlear, supraorbital arteries, and also they are branches from the ophthalmic artery. The inferior eyelid take blood supply from the infraorbital artery, branch from maxillary artery. There is other blood supply or adjuvant blood supply from transverse facial artery and superficial temporal artery, and both branches from external carotid artery. Also here is the angular artery, which coming from the facial artery, or it's the termination of the facial artery. This is the angular artery, and the facial artery also coming from the external carotid artery. To summarize the blood supply of the eyelids, take mainly from the medial and lateral palpebral arteries, each of which divided into superior and inferior division, making arterial arcades forming the main arterial supply of the eyelids. Other arteries like infraorbital, facial, transverse facial, and superficial temporal arteries. Venous drainage of the eyelids, the eyelids drain their veins either superficially or deep. Superficially through the nerves of the face and the forehead, or the venous drainage passes deeply through the ophthalmic veins, superior ophthalmic and inferior ophthalmic veins. When we talk about nerve supply of the eyelid, we must divide them into motor supply, sensory supply, and autonomic supply. The motor supply to the palpebral muscles, like orbicularis oculi muscle, take nerve supply from the facial nerve, and levator palpebrae superioris muscle take nerve supply from the oculomotor nerve. Sensory innervation to the eyelids coming from the ophthalmic and maxillary nerves, which are branches of the trigeminal nerve, the fifth cranial nerve, like this. The lateral corner of the eyelid supplied by lacrimal nerve, the medial corner supplied by infratrochlear nerve, the superior eyelid supplied also by supratrochlear and supraorbital nerves, the inferior eyelid supplied by the infraorbital nerve. So the medial corner supplied by infratrochlear, lateral corner by lacrimal, upper eyelid supplied by supratrochlear and supraorbital, but the lower eyelid supplied by infraorbital. Autonomic innervation, we all know that the tarsal muscle takes sympathetic innervation, either superior tarsal, which is the first molar muscle, inferior tarsal, which is the second molar muscle, and we have also third molar muscle, and we will take you chance to discover what is the third molar muscle. Other autonomic innervation to the eyelids is the nerve supply to the eyelids gland, either sweet or mucus or spacious gland of the eyelids. It take autonomic innervation from the parasympathetic ganglia called trigopalatine ganglia, and we will discuss this matter later on in the lecture of nerve supply of the eye. Lymphatic drainage of the eyelids. The inferior tarsal muscle. The inferior tarsal muscle originates from the fibrous sheath of the inferior oblique and the inferior rectus. This is the inferior tarsus muscle, and inserted into the lower border of the inferior tarsal plate. Also takes sympathetic nerve supply. The action of both tarsal, superior and inferior tarsal, is they help in elevation and depression of the eyelids respectively. Also, they widen the orbital fissure. Now we finished our lecture, and we will take you to self-assessment. The first question. Chalazion is inflammation of the following gland. What is the chalazion? Inflammation of meibomian gland, gland of Moll, gland of Zeiss, lacrimal gland, mucus secreting goblet cells. Meibomian gland. Here I want to tell you what is the difference between chalazion and stye. Chalazion is inflammation of the meibomian gland, which means that it present deep to the tarsal plate, and this inflammation forming a mass, but this mass is painless. This is different from the stye. Stye is the infection of the sebaceous gland or sweet gland, infection of sweet gland of Moll or sebaceous gland of Zeiss. Because it's infection, it is painful and red, and this infection superficial to the tarsal plate. The chalazion requires surgical interference to remove this mass, but the stye, its inflammation may be treated by medical treatment. STI is painless, deep to tarsal plate, requires surgical excision, infection of gland of mole or zis, inflammation of tarsal gland, infection of gland of mole or zis. STI is painful and superficial to the tarsal plate and may be treated or frequently treated by medication, and it is infection of the sweet or sebaceous gland of the eyelid. The orbicularis oculi muscle is supplied by oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, facial nerve, takes sympathetic supply, or ophthalmic nerve. Orbicularis oculi supplied by facial nerve. The tarsal muscles attached to the orbital margin or produce gentle closure of the eye, draw the eyebrow downward, produce forced closure of the eye, or help in opening the eye. The right answer is help in opening the eye. Levator palpebrae superioris is supplied by oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, facial nerve, takes sympathetic supply, or ophthalmic nerve. Oculomotor nerve. Thanks.